Chapter 21, Madness. I was told that the Latin kings had shot a couple of gay lords for what they did to me, but I didn't care. I still wanted to get my revenge myself. The attitude that I must do something to prove my worth was turning me into an animal. I felt like I had to defend my pride and my honor. Maria in China nursed me back to full health. I was ready to go out and face the world for the first time in about 3 months. When I was jumped by the gay lords, it was summer. Now that I was ready to hit the streets again, it was already winter. I was told that Papo had been arrested for the incident at Clemente High School during those 3 months I had been in seclusion. Hector had been raided twice in 1 week and arrested both times. As always, he made bail rather quickly. But after his second arrest, Hector moved out of the neighborhood and left everything, including me, behind. The building where he lived was now abandoned. I had no idea where he was, and I didn't care to find out. His place had been a haven for junkies and homeless people. I was told that junkies would walk out of the building carrying Hector's furniture to sell. I didn't care. Maria had already told me that I could consider her home my own. I was also told that Jenny was having sex with anyone who approached her. Somehow, I wasn't surprised. I did not want to see or even hear about Jenny. I decided not to go back to school until it was warm outside. In the meantime, I was spending a lot of time with China. Maria gave China the okay to come and stay with me in her house. Maria became more motherly than I had ever imagined her to be. I made sexual advances toward her several times when we were alone, but she refused, even when she was drunk. Instead, she would scold me and start crying and apologizing about having molested me. I stopped coming on to her so she could stop that song and dance. It was getting old. I came to realize that I would never again make love to Maria, but in my heart, I was really thankful for the things that she had taught me. She made me a man, and I was especially thankful that she cared enough to give me the food and shelter I needed to survive. The other girl, Yolanda, had moved out while I was in the hospital. She met a sincere man. She was smart enough to recognize this and became faithful to him. That move paid off for her. He asked her to live with him, and they were planning to marry next summer. Although China and I slept together, we didn't have sex. I tried and tried to make love to her, but she had too much respect for herself. She kept telling me that she made a promise to herself, her father, and to God that she would still be a virgin until she got married. She wasn't about to break that promise for anyone, not even me. I respected her wishes, but then again, I didn't have any other choice. Even though I knew China would refuse, I kept trying. She still considered me her boyfriend and didn't deny me anything but sex. The sexual tension became so great that I started making stupid remarks like, "Don't be a prick teaser." China kept her cool and said I was teasing myself. She told me how far she would go, but I wouldn't listen. She was right, as always. I began going by Jenny's again. She was still waiting and willing, only now I wasn't the only one who was climbing up to her window. Jenny acted like she was so happy to see me, but I knew that she was only happy because she had someone to fuck. Same old Jenny. She wasted no time getting me in the mood. When Jenny and I first began making love to each other, I felt the need to make sure she was satisfied. But now I didn't really care what she felt. Jenny tried hard to make sure it lasted, but I gave her the wham bam thank you ma'am treatment, then got dressed. As I got dressed, she would tell me I wasn't as good as before and how she missed the old me. All I said was, "Be patient, someone else will be knocking at her window shortly." By the look on her face, I knew she was hurt by what I said, but I didn't care. I meant it to hurt her. She actually told me that no matter what happened, I was still her number one. That bitch had some nerve thinking those little words were going to change anything. Nevertheless, I kept going to her to relieve my sexual frustrations, and she never turned me down. I became bored with the same old routine every day. First, I would get myself horny as hell with China, and then I would go and get off with Jenny. There were about 2 months of school left, so I decided to go back. I told Maria to call the school. They said I could report to class on the following Monday. On Saturday, a couple of kings from Kedzie and Armitage came by Maria's house to talk to me. They were the same guys who visited at the hospital. They came to see if I was alright and to tell me that they had made a hit on the Gaylords. I said I wanted my own revenge, but I didn't really mean it. I was only acting tough, trying to enhance my reputation as a badass. The Kings did the unexpected. They volunteered to drive and help me get my revenge. I swallowed a gallon of saliva trying to hide my fear and nervousness. I agreed to meet them at Tully later on that night. As soon as they left, I became panicky. My body trembled with fear. I ran downstairs and tried to catch them to say I had changed my mind, but they were gone. China noticed my fear and knew right away what was wrong. She tried to talk some sense into me. She said it would be stupid for me to go with the Kings. She reminded me about our dreams for the future and how I could get killed or go to jail. All I could think about was being thought of as a coward. My macho pride was more important than anything else. I didn't want the Latin Kings to turn on me like the Lords had. I had to act. I spent the rest of the day pacing back and forth, nervous as hell. China kept lecturing me. I kept ignoring her. I searched every corner of the house looking for marijuana, but to no avail. I had to get high. It was the only way I could calm my nerves. Against China's protest, I went outside. I went by Tully and found Snake, Rican, and Speedy. They were drinking Jingle Juice, Bacardi, and smoking weed. I joined them. When I took a hit from a joint, I felt relief. I began talking about what I was going to do to the Gaylords. After a while, I was pretty high, and I was anxious for the Kings to arrive. Rican had a piece of pipe about 1.5 feet long in his car. The pipe was completely wrapped in duct tape. It was heavy and solid. I asked Rican to let me borrow it. He agreed to lend it to me, but only if I promised to bring it back with Gaylord's blood on it. Snake and Speedy had gone to get another bottle of jungle juice. When they returned, Snake began teasing me about Speedy having sex with Jenny while I was still her boyfriend. I had completely forgotten about that until then. I had come to realize that Jenny was addicted to sex, so it was going to happen sooner or later. With that in mind, I tried to ignore Snake's comments. I laughed off the insults Snakes was throwing at me. Then Speedy joined in on the onslaught. He started bragging about Jenny's pussy being his and how he was fucking the shit out of her every day. My anger was becoming evident, but I controlled myself by thinking of Jenny as nothing but a horny ass bitch. At that very moment, the Kings arrived to pick me up. Speedy kept teasing me. He said I wasn't man enough for Jenny. I realized that ignoring him and laughing at him was just making Speedy talk more shit. I advised him to stop the bullshit and began walking toward the car. The asshole didn't stop. The last thing I heard him say was that if I was a man, Jenny would still be mine. I turned around, rushed him, and began beating him with the pipe Rican had lent me. Rican, Snake, and the Kings pulled me away from him. His face and head were bleeding. I had no remorse for what I had done. I grabbed the bottle of Bacardi, took a long drink, and walked toward the car, anxious to get on our way. Before I left, I warned Speedy that the next time he fucked with me, I would kill him. I went to hit him again, but Rican stepped in the way. My heart was beating so fast that it felt like it would pop out of my chest. "Come on, brother, let's go," one of the Kings said as he pulled me toward him. I got in the car with the Kings and began our search and destroy mission against the Gaylords. The two Kings with me were named Lalo and Paco. Lalo was driving, I was riding shotgun, and Paco was in the back seat. Lalo was a tall, slim guy with pushed back hair. He always had this evil look on his face, as if he was some kind of psycho. Lalo spoke very little, but when he did talk, all he did was curse. Paco had a medium build with long, stringy hair that he kept in a ponytail. He had a birthmark on the upper left side of his face that made him look mean, but he was a comedian and was always making jokes. Paco was the total opposite of Lalo. He talked a lot and was very articulate. The only time Paco cursed was when he told a joke or described something that made him angry. Both Paco and Lalo were in their 20s. Both had been Latin Kings since their early teens. They asked me about the incident with Speedy. When I told them about it, they laughed and then they told me that they would have done the same thing. They also advised me to have a talk with the unknowns about it. They told me to tell the unknowns that I was a king and they would be fair with me because of the unification between the two gangs. Lalo said he would go with me and verify that I was a king. I didn't think that all that was necessary because I knew almost all of the unknowns personally, but Lalo insisted. On our way to the Gaylords' hood, we passed under the viaduct where I had been beaten senseless. Immediately after the viaduct, we turned west on Bloomingdale Street and headed toward Campbell Street. By experience, we knew that we would run into some Gaylords long before we reached the intersection of Moffett and Campbell Streets where they hung out. We spotted 4 guys crossing Bloomingdale, headed south. I recognized one of them as the guy who had stopped me under the viaduct. I told Lalo to follow them. He sped up and turned south on Campbell, even though it was a one-way street going north. The Gaylords had stopped under the viaduct and were too busy spray painting the walls to notice us. Lalo handed me a gun. Papo and I jumped out of the car and cornered them under the bridge. Papo also had a gun and was going to start blasting right away, but I stopped him. I walked up to the guy who set me up and asked him if he recognized me. He began to cry and beg for mercy. He found none. "Don't kill me, man. I'm not a Gaylord," the guy said. "Fucking pussy. You don't remember me, motherfucker?" I yelled at the top of my lungs while standing only inches away from him. "I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry," he said as I got ready to swing the pipe. "Gaylord killer," I yelled as I began hitting the shit out of him with the piece of pipe. I completely forgot I had a gun in my other hand. I became oblivious to the other Gaylords who were there, or anything else for that matter. The Gaylord put his hand in front of his head in an attempt to protect himself. I heard the bone break when I hit it. I had lost my mind. The more blood I saw, the harder I hit him. Suddenly I heard gunshots. I snapped out of my crazy spell and noticed that Papo had shot one of the Gaylords and was getting in position to shoot another one. The guy was standing too close to me, so Papo hesitated. I stepped out of Papo's way and he shot him. The guy fell toward me and I busted him in the head with the pipe. Papo and I ran toward the car. Papo jumped in the driver's seat. We reversed to go back down Bloomingdale and saw Lalo repeatedly stabbing the last of the Gaylords present. We drove toward Lalo and he jumped in the car. He stuck his head out the window and yelled, "King Love," as we sped away. Lalo and Papo dropped me off at Western and North Avenue and told me to walk home from there. I had a better idea. I spotted the bus coming up Western and decided to sneak on. I still had the gun Lalo gave me in my possession. Papo had told me to leave the pipe in the car so they could get rid of it. I snuck on the bus and rode it to Potomac Street. I felt no fear. In fact, I felt brave and proud, indestructible. I had gotten my revenge. The Latin Kings were my allies, and, most important, I had taken a big step toward building the tough guy reputation I so desired. As I got off the bus, I noticed the Spanish lords standing on the corner yelling out their gang slogan. I crossed the street and joined them. They were yelling at the Cobras who were standing on Artesian and Potomac Streets exchanging hostilities with the lords. I went by Crazy One and asked him to give me some of the wine he was drinking. I drank about half of the bottle in one swallow. I gave Crazy One back the wine and asked him if he would walk with me towards the Cobras. As we crossed the street, I turned around and lifted my shirt so the lords could see I had a gun and therefore would not follow us. When the Cobras saw us coming, they spread out in a hostile manner. Crazy One was yelling at them to get out of the lords' hood. The Cobras yelled obscenities as they threw bottles and rocks at us. I pulled out the gun and ran towards them. When they noticed I had a gun, they started running west toward their hood. There was one guy who had a Cobra sweater under his leather jacket. As he ran, he slipped on some ice and fell. By the time he was getting back up, I was standing above him with the gun held to his head. I demanded he give me the sweater. He took it off and gave it to me. I told him to leave before Crazy One began beating the shit out of him. Crazy One and I walked back to the other lords, congratulating each other. I gave the sweater to Rican and told him that the sweater should be enough of a payment for losing his pipe. He took it and told me that I should have killed the Cobra. It seemed like the only one satisfied was Crazy One. All the others were talking about how I should have pulled the trigger. I was high, but I wasn't that high. I ignored them and walked to Maria's apartment. My opinion of the lords began to deteriorate quickly after that. I made up my mind never to join them. I thought I might become a king or even an unknown, but never a lord. Things were happening fast. And one night, I had a confrontation with Speedy, the Gaylords, and the Cobras. I was digging my own grave because I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be looked up to. The only way I knew of achieving that status among the gang members was to commit as many violent acts as possible. That's how it worked. Do unto others, then do unto someone else. Finally, those around me stopped thinking of me as a coward. Maria's apartment was now my official home. Hector never came looking for me or sent anyone to ask about me. I really didn't care. I had a new family that cared for me now. Morena showed up and told me to stay in the house. Rumor was that the Gaylords had given the police a pretty good description of me. Morena told me that if I didn't have any police record, the police would probably pick up anyone that fit my description. All I had to do was stay out of sight. I got scared. I wasn't high at that point, so my thoughts were clear. I saw myself going to jail and being beaten and raped. I smoked a joint and it calmed my nerves. Whenever I got high, I became lost in the kingdom of macho trips. I would brag about my actions and advertise my desire to repeat those acts. Sober, however, I was nervous and paranoid, like a puppy trying to hide from thunder. China saw right through my mask. She was there when Morena told me about the police and how worried I was. China said she didn't want a hardcore gangbanger for a boyfriend. She also said that she had decided to make love to me, but now that was an impossibility. I knew that this wasn't really true. She often used that type of psychology with me, but it didn't work anymore. China had hopes that going back to school would change my attitude. She said she would leave me if I didn't change.